Talking about narcissism, what kind of people are you picturing in your mind? We may picture someone who is extremely confident, enjoys the spotlight, and talks about how great they are. You may hate this kind of person for exaggerating their accomplishments, taking credit for things they didn't do, and making others feel inferior around them. This is what is known as a narcissist. However, there is actually more than one type of narcissist. Some of them may act like what we have mentioned above, while others may be less detectable. So, the next question would be, what is narcissism? Narcissism is a personality trait characterized by an inflated sense of self-importance, a lack of empathy for others, and a need for admiration from others. Within the realm of narcissism, there are two distinct subtypes: grandiose narcissism and vulnerable narcissism. Grandiose narcissism is typically associated with a sense of superiority and entitlement, a desire for power and control, and a belief that one is special or unique. People with grandiose narcissism may have an exaggerated sense of their own abilities and accomplishments. They may seek out praise and admiration from others to bolster their self-esteem. They may also be prone to anger or aggression when their sense of superiority is challenged. On the other hand, vulnerable narcissism is characterized by a more fragile sense of self-esteem and a fear of rejection or criticism from others. People with vulnerable narcissism may appear shy or introverted, and may struggle with social anxiety or feelings of inadequacy. They may also be prone to depression, anxiety, and other mental health issues. While both types of narcissism share some common traits, such as a need for attention and admiration, they can involve different social motivations. Crocker proposed that two fundamental social motive systems exist: the ecosystem motive and the ecosystem motive. The ecosystem motive is driven by internal factors such as personal goals, self-worth, and achievement. This system is characterized by a focus on individual success and the desire for recognition, advancement, and control over one's environment. Those who are motivated by their ecosystem tend to be competitive, ambitious, and driven to succeed at all costs, even if it means negatively impacting others. Therefore, the ecosystem promotes self-centered, self-interested, and egoistic behaviors. On the other hand, the ecosystem motive is driven by external factors such as social norms, community values, and the well-being of others. This system is characterized by a focus on collaborative effort, teamwork, and the common good. Those who are motivated by their ecosystem tend to be community-oriented, compassionate, and driven to make a positive impact on others and the environment. These two systems are negatively related, so that when people are motivated by the ecosystem, they are less likely to be motivated by the ecosystem, and vice versa. Both types of narcissism involve specific patterns of social motivation. Researchers found that people who pursued self-system goals were more likely to show grandiose narcissistic tendencies, while those who pursued compassionate or ecosystem goals were less likely to show narcissistic tendencies. However, our review of related studies suggests that more research has been conducted on the relationship between grandiose narcissism and social motivation, and less on vulnerable narcissism. As a result, we have raised two research questions. What motivates the interpersonal behaviors of individuals with vulnerable narcissism? Given the significant differences in personal traits and social behavior patterns between grandiose and vulnerable narcissists, do they share the same or similar social motives? Our study proposed hypotheses based on previous research. First, similarity in egocentricity with grandiose narcissism. Vulnerable narcissism shares similarities with grandiose narcissism in the sense that both subtypes have a willingness to exploit others for their own gain. Additionally, Krizan found that vulnerable narcissism is associated with a stronger ecosystem motive. Second, contrary relationship between ecosystem and ecosystem. Crocker research demonstrated that individuals are less likely to be motivated by the ecosystem when driven by the ecosystem and vice versa. Based on these findings, our study proposes a hypothesis that vulnerable narcissism exhibit a positive correlation with ecosystem motivation while demonstrating a negative correlation with ecosystem motivation. In this study, we recruited 84 participants. Participants were asked to answer 2 continuous scales consisting of 23 items in total, regarding narcissism and social motives, as well as demographic information such as age. The questionnaire was distributed randomly to ensure a diverse sample and reduce bias. For measuring vulnerable narcissism, we used the hypersensitive narcissism scale, developed by Glover, which is a commonly used scale in previous research. The HSNS consists of 10 items of 5-point scale. The final score for each participant was calculated by summarizing all items. Previous studies have shown that HSNS has good reliability and construct validity. To measure social motivation, we used the compassionate and self-image goal scale developed by Crocker, which reflects ecosystem and ecosystem motivation, respectively. The compassionate and self-image goal scale has been shown to have good reliability and construct validity in previous studies. There are 3 key variables in this study: vulnerable narcissism, compassionate goals, and self-image goals. For data analysis, we run a correlation between these 3 variables. There are 81 valid samples. 3 invalid samples were excluded from the results. 3 major points were found in our results. First, the data shows a significant positive correlation between vulnerable narcissism and self-image goals, which align with our hypothesis. Second, there is no significant correlation between vulnerable narcissism and compassionate goals. Third, compassionate goals show significant positive correlation with self-goals, which is not expected in our background research. The previous result led us to the first discussion question: why is vulnerable narcissism highly correlated with self-image goals? We found that vulnerable narcissists seek validation due to fragile self-esteem and insecurities. They prioritize self-image goals to cope with their feelings of inadequacy. We summarize the specific reasons as follows. First, need for validation. Vulnerable narcissists have a strong need for external validation and approval to manage their deep-seated insecurities and fragile self-worth. They may rely on positive feedback and self-enhancement strategies to maintain a favorable self-image and protect their self-esteem. Second, heightened concern with self-presentation. Vulnerable narcissists are hypersensitive to criticism and rejection, leading to a heightened concern with self-presentation. They prioritize self-image goals to manage potential threats to their self-esteem and maintain a positive self-image. Third, sensitive to negative evaluations. Research suggests that vulnerable narcissists are highly invested in managing their self-image goals and may be more sensitive to negative evaluations than grandiose narcissists. By pursuing self-image goals, vulnerable narcissists attempt to secure positive feedback from others and maintain a sense of control over how others perceive them. The second issue we want to discuss is, why do vulnerable narcissists share the same social motivation with grandiose narcissists? Vulnerable narcissism and grandiose narcissism, while distinct as 2 subtypes of narcissism, share some commonalities. First, grandiose narcissism and vulnerable narcissism share some common cores that are the presence of a pervasive pattern of grandiosity, entitlement, and self-centeredness. Both subtypes display traits that reflect a high level of self-focus and a lack of concern for others' needs, which can result in a lack of compassionate motivation. Second, another commonality that leads to the similar result is the presence of interpersonal difficulties. Both subtypes struggle with forming and maintaining healthy relationships due to their self-centeredness and difficulty emphasizing with others, which affects prosocial behaviors. Thirdly, narcissistic social motivation is largely for the purpose of self-esteem regulation. Both vulnerable and grandiose narcissism involve the need for validation and constant feedback from others to maintain self-worth. Research shows that self-enhancement tactics of vulnerable narcissism and grandiose narcissism are associated with a more antisocial and less prosocial interpersonal orientation. Last, vulnerable narcissism and grandiose narcissism apply different self-enhancement tactics for that low self-esteem and shame propensity, which make it impossible for vulnerable narcissists to consistently employ the self-enhancement strategies used by grandiose narcissists. Then comes to the tricky results that we are about to discuss. First, no significant correlation between the vulnerable narcissism and compassionate goals, which is quite different from our hypothesis. Second, our result, which showed compassionate goals and self-image goals were significantly positively correlated as opposed to Crocker's theory. There are several possible explanations for this result. First, the sample size may not have been large enough to demonstrate significance. Second, the age distribution of our participants was skewed towards younger individuals, with only 4 participants over 35. Age could be a confounding variable influencing the correlation. Both reasons may lead to the unrepresentativeness of the sample with higher VN score. Our self-report survey may be affected by response bias and expectancy bias, such as social desirability bias, where participants may respond in a socially desirable manner. This can lead to higher scores of compassionate goals and a non-significant relationship with self-image goals and vulnerable narcissism. The samples show high scores in both compassionate goals and image goals were contributed by more high VN samples as shown in the figure. Vulnerable narcissists have a more fragile sense of self. The process of completing a questionnaire measuring their VN level and the social motivation may be a threat to their self-concept, consciously or unconsciously. Consequently, they answer in a more defensive way as a strategy to protect their self-concept, which results in higher scores of compassionate goals. Vulnerable narcissists may show more compassion when benefits outweigh costs, and higher compassionate goals also reported in non-emergency audience-observed situations. To improve our research design, we should try our best to reduce the expectancy bias by developing subtle and unobtrusive methods, combining self-report surveys with observation and interviews for more accurate data, and capturing participants' real thoughts and motivations more effectively. Additionally, we need to decrease sampling error by extending the range of our participants in further studies to ensure that the sample is more representative of the population. Thank you for listening.